promote your business? Do you want to talk about your nonprofit organization? Do you want to talk about your culture? Introducing the online web TV, Afric Today. Fogham. You can watch us live at the same time on 4 platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and using the Afric Today app. Download our app today for Android or Apple. Promote your business today. For more information, go to www.africtoday.com. Afric Today, the best of digital TV. Do you want to promote your business? Do you want to talk about your nonprofit organization? Do you want to talk about your culture? Introducing the online web TV, Afric Today. Fogham. You can watch us live at the same time on 4 platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and using the Afric Today app. Download our app today for Android or Apple. Promote your business today. For more information, go to www.africtoday.com. Afric Today, the best of digital TV.
evening and welcome to the voice of AAU. And we're excited today, and I want to thank everyone for coming out and being such faithful watchers and being with us on our show. Unfortunately, today you won't be able to call in. As you know, we usually have a live show, but hopefully next week you'll be able to call in. And also next week, you're going to see some new commercials too, hopefully. We're working on some stuff to brighten things up. But I want to thank you today for joining. I am your host, Dr. Yvette Butler Yaboa, and my co-host,
The Invisible Man. Hello.
and so we're on a different platform today. So hopefully there won't be any glitches, but we had some technical problems earlier with just some of the controls. So if things happen today, please just bear with us. And I want to thank you again. We are excited. This is Black History Month, as we all know. And now we have Black History Month. They're naming it every other, they're giving every other week a different name, but this is Black History Month. And we're here to focus on Black folks and Black issues. And today we're going to talk about Black mental health and COVID. And as you know, I always start my show off with a short video, but we're really excited. We have a wonderful, wonderful guest who's well versed in this subject. But before I introduce my guest and let her talk a little bit more about herself, today we're going to look about Black mental health and what's going on in our communities, and sometimes the stigma around it. So let's watch this video first, and then I'm going to ask my special guest tonight, which we're really excited to have on. I would say Dr. Fluid, and maybe a lot of you might know her from Howard University, but I'm going to tell you a little bit more about her after we watch this very short video, just to set the stage of really looking at what mental health in the Black community. Video, please.
African Americans have one of the highest rates of untreated mental health disorders among all racial groups. This is due to a long history of institutionalized racism and high levels of cultural stigma. For example, the belief that mental illness is seen as a weakness or spiritual flaw. This stigma can prevent people from accessing the treatment they need to get better. Cultural considerations are important when developing treatments for this group. Many place high value on the church and religion as a coping tool and source of strength for problems, including mental health issues. Respected spiritual leaders can be harnessed to provide support for those with mental illness in their communities. When the leaders work collaboratively with mental health professionals, then there is a potential to provide mental health expertise in a culturally relevant context, creating fair access to proper mental health treatment.
Thank you so much. And I'll just say a bit about mental health and me personally. I actually, as you know, I am a physician, and when I did my psych rotation, I really wasn't as versed on mental health myself. And in my community and from my background, mental health was seen as a weakness. And you didn't go to the doctor for any mental health issues. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce my guest, and she's going to talk to you more about the stigma, some of the challenges, especially as it revolves around COVID, and then what are some solutions and how we can identify mental health issues, and a little bit about what's happening right now with the social isolation, especially with our African American and African or Black young and adult people in this community. So without further ado, I'd like to bring to you, we're so excited, Dr. Kelechi Blood Fluid, PhD. She has a PhD. She's a clinical staff member of psychology and associate and director of the outreach at Howard University. And we say HU. I used to teach there. I'm excited. I said, HU, and they say the real HU. I says, Dr. Fluid received her PhD in counseling psychology from Howard University. She completed her American Psychological Association accreditation and internship at Howard University as well. Counseling service. Dr. Fluid is has a diverse clinical background and training and experience, including Veterans Administration, DC Superior Court, University of Community Colleges. She recently completed 2 fellowship at the Washington School of Psychiatric National Group Psychotherapy Institute in Washington, D.C. She specializes in issues for HBCU students predominantly and looks at self-efficacy, leadership, efficacy, effectiveness, imposter, which we're going to get to that also, imposter syndrome, religious coping, and grief. We want to welcome Dr. Floyd. All right, I keep saying Floyd, Fluid. We want to welcome Dr. Fluid to our show today. Thank you so much. Dr. Fluid, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I guess if I had to describe myself, I think the first thing that would come to me is Nigerian American. So I'm first gen. My parents are born and raised in Nigeria. They're Igbo. And I was born in Washington, D.C. and raised in both Nigeria and in America. So I think the biggest thing for me is just recognizing my cultural background and how that impacts me and how that impacts how I view the world. In addition, I would say I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a doctor, I'm a clinician. I view myself in a healing role or to help people on their journey or their path to healing through mental health, support. And I'm an outreach director. I love doing outreach work, which allows me to get into the community, but also to work with the students at Howard University. I'm a 3-time HBCU alum. So I went to Winston-Salem State for undergrad and went to Bowie State for graduate school and then did my PhD at Howard University. So I believe in the power of historically Black colleges and universities and its ability to shape and form an individual as well as their life. And I'm a believer. I think if I had to leave that off, that would be the piece that really brings it all together for me.
Nice. And thank you so much to coming on our show, especially such a short notice. And here it is, Black History Month.
Yes.
And we know mental health is an issue with our communities and identifying it and recognizing it. But first, I wanted you to tell us a little bit about what is imposter syndrome? What exactly is that?
So I think if I had to shorten it and define it in my own terms, it's the assumption that one does not belong where they are. And so it is found a lot in many communities, but a lot of people that express it or speak to it are in more of your brown and Black communities. And it is the fact that you went through all of this process. You have gone through school, you've gone through learning, you've gone through training, you've done internships, you've had jobs, and you arrive at this career or this opportunity, but yet there's this part of you in the back, like wondering if at some point they'll recognize that you don't belong. And so it really is a mental thing. We really do have to shift our mindset on it because the reality is you belong. You've done the work. You've done what you needed to do. You have gone through the process. And so that is your seat at the table. You're not taking up anybody else's seat. That is your seat. It belongs to you. So really just realigning ourselves and reminding ourselves that we've done the work that allows us to be in the spaces that we occupy and not to take that for granted and not to diminish our success or the community and the village that has gotten us there, but to rather take our seat and know that this seat belongs to us.
Now, because this is my first time really hearing about imposter syndrome. That's new to me, and it was a new terminology. It wasn't there when I was learning psychology as a medical student, and especially when I did my rotation in the psychiatric ward. But
yeah,
how frequently are we seeing this, and what are some of the reasons behind people having this imposter syndrome?
Well, I think we can see it as frequently as when people express it. So someone may be thinking it, but they may not give it voice or they may not give it life. They may just pass it on behind their mind and keep moving and keep pushing. And I really do think that it comes from or a piece of it comes from our experience as people of the diaspora in the United States. We have not been allowed to be in areas or take up our space in a way that is authentic to us. Our accomplishments have not been as celebrated as other races have. We have not been given the same opportunities as other people have. And we're in our communities, it feels like only certain people are highlighted, when we know that there's so many more that are doing the work and so many more that are dynamic, right? And so I think a lot of that some of that is an unconscious feeling around, now that I'm in this space, do I deserve to be here? Because there has not been an acknowledgement of the fact that we do deserve to be here, just like everyone else, because we've done the work. So it's interesting because it may or may not come up for a lot of people, but a lot of people may have thought about it. They probably have considered it, but just not given it any voice or any life. I learned a little bit about it, or started, having some conversations about it in graduate school. And just, with other colleagues and other professions, just, the assumption like, am I supposed to be here? Like, do I deserve to be here? And I think another piece is for Black PhDs, I want to say the rate of Black PhDs is about 1 or 2%. So often it's because there's not a lot of people that occupy the spaces or given the opportunity to occupy the spaces that allow people to have these feelings of imposter syndrome.
Well, thank you so much. And, I want to get back to like the stigma. And then remember the video talked about 75% of us don't even seek care, and don't really, and we have mental issues and we have mental illnesses, and they're being highlighted more as we see stars talking about it. For example, Taraji Henderson just talked about it just recently and brought it to the forefront again with regard to COVID. But what are some of the stigmas? And you coming from a variety from a mixed background of African descent, how Africans view it versus African Americans look at things. Can you give us a perspective on that? And how do we overcome some of the things that are going on in our communities and the stigma around it?
I think when you think about stigma, you think about myth. Sometimes that is aligned with me. So when I think about stigma, oftentimes people did not want to seek mental health services because of fear of looking weak. They did not want to give voice to or present in a way that made them feel less than. And so often they would not seek services because they didn't want to acknowledge whatever it is that's happening to them, but also they didn't want people to view them in a certain light. When you're thinking about the differences or potential differences between someone who may identify as African American and someone who may identify as African, we have to consider the cultural background, right? So in some of our households, for individuals that may be African American or identify as such, the conversation is whatever happens in this home stays in this home, right? And so whatever you're dealing with, whatever you're going through, we will work through it as a family. We will get through it as a family. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But that is the way in which things were viewed. And so people would not seek outside services because that's going, quote, outside of the home, right? And even when I'm thinking about African backgrounds, there's stigmas around it because mental illness may be associated with other spiritual things in the culture.
Yes.
And so a lot of people did not view it in the same light as, as a concern, as a quote unquote, maybe like a broken toe or a dental issue or a back problem, because it had some spiritual connotations to it. This person is suffering from this because there may be a spiritual connection there. So I think when we think about stigma, you think about potential weakness, how people would view you, not wanting your quote business to be in the street, right? Not wanting other people to know what's happening for you. The fear that other people will find out that there's something quote unquote potentially wrong with you, which is it's not true, right? There is obviously always going to be concern around confidentiality. And if I'm able to speak to this person, will other people know what's happening with me? will other people view me differently and maybe not give me opportunities, maybe not want to work with me, maybe not want to support me. And so a lot of people suffer in silence because of this and many more.
Yes, and yes, go ahead.
Let me throw out the from 2002 to 2017, there were roughly 50,000 people who earned PhD who look like us, and that's 5.1% to 5.4% according to the data from the National Science Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you. So we see, 5% or 5.4% is still a very low number in comparison to the population. So, but thank you for those. I appreciate. I love facts. Thank you.
Well, let me ask a question, because you touched a bit on it, but spiritual. How do we overcome that? Because I am married to a Ghanaian, Yaboa, and a lot of times I have seen that if you're in certain cultures, look at if you have a mental health issue, it's this negative connotation as far as a demon or something's in you, and how do we overcome that and really get help? Because unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of young people who are coming from various backgrounds, and especially of color, now being on the verge of suicide or committing suicide because they can't even talk to their peers or parents or have someone who they can trust to talk about their mental health issues.
Yeah. Well, one, very true. Number two, I think one of the ways in which we can address it is by building more community. So there needs to be more community between the religious community and mental health, right? And so there are many ways in which people can foster community. If you think about potentially your church or your religious organization, you may know who's a nurse, who's a doctor, who's a dentist, who is a physical therapist. Even though these are people that are worshiping with you, they have professions outside of Sunday. And so you're aware of, if I may have this question around health, I can talk to sister so-and-so or brother so-and-so. And it needs to be the same way with mental health, right? We really need to encourage the people that serve in these communities, that worship in these spaces, to make themselves known. I may be a licensed social worker. I may work in the mental health field. I may be a caseworker. I may be a clinician. I may be a psychologist or a psychiatrist, right? And being able to make ourselves known in the community, and for the communities to now have partnerships where they have discussions about it, right? There is now a lot of discussion around mental illness, but also mental wellness. And the importance of being whole, mind, body, and soul. I'm noticing that a lot of churches are starting to talk about that. My own church talks about Trinity Fitness, right? That is what my pastor has labeled it, right? So spiritually fit, physically fit, but social, emotionally fit. So being able to have these dialogues and these conversations is how we start to build community and trust, where people know, okay, this person works in this field. I may be having this concern. I can speak to them and maybe they can provide me with a referral or ways that I can get connected with services.
Thank you. Now, you saw, I'm going to go back to the video again, because you saw they said discrimination, racism. So explain to me and the audience, actually, the lingering effects of slavery and how that really impacted our people today as far as it relates to mental illnesses.
That's a loaded question. But I think it's valuable. I think it's important to really recognize that there are things that impact us on a day-to-day that we are conscious of and unconscious of. So there are things that affect us that we may not be mindful of, or we may not be able to place where that comes from. And I think being a people that have gone through so much trauma, that have experienced trauma even up until today, that trauma impacts not only how we relate to one another, but it also impacts how we view one another and how we view helping authorities, right? So there's so many things that happen from slavery to now from being sold to being whipped, to being raped, to being killed, to being ostracized, to being sold. So many things that even though we may not be actively going through it, as descendants of people who have gone through that, it is almost in our fiber, and it impacts us. It impacts the way in which we think, impacts the way in which we engage with one another. I'm thinking about a lot of things that's happening right now in society and how some of the collective unconscious is playing out in our thoughts about different things. But even when I think about just mental health and mental wellness, or just access in general, we have not really had that. We were not giving access to doctors and hospitals. We were not giving access to wellness and health. We were always the people that were taking from and not given to. And so I think often that impacts our ability to give to ourselves, but also to give to others.
Yeah, I've heard of you heard of the PTSD syndrome of the Black man, right?
PTSD in general
yeah,
of the Black community. Yeah.
Yes. Well, when I say the Black man, I'm talking about, I'm considering myself that just our general population, because you know that they say the Black man, but they talk about our whole community, and it's very unfortunate. I think it's just from the things you said, the lingering effects of slavery, and the still persistent.
Yeah.
The persistent demoralization and demarginalization of people of color, especially Black people in this country and across the world. So let me ask you I'm going to switch gears now. Can you address Black girl magic? Now, you heard of the Black girl magic, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And conversely to white girl magic. So can you tell us a little bit about Black girl magic and as it relates to white girl magic?
So I haven't really heard the term coined white girl magic before. But when I think about Black girl magic, I think about the beauty of an entire group of people. And I think of people giving opportunities to shine. I'm smiling because I've just been seeing it a lot displayed over these last couple of years, and it makes me full, right? I even think back to 3 weeks ago at the inauguration, Amanda Gorham, right? The young poet laureate, and her ability to just I just got chills, wow the crowd and take us in and journey us, right? Through this, through where we've been and hopefully where we're going, and encourage us, right? I think about Michelle Obama and how I gasped, really, as soon as she hit the stage at the inauguration. I literally gasped while watching it at home with family, right? I think about, all of these dynamic people that are doing things, whether in ballet or whether in gymnastics, whether in education. I think about, obviously, Kamala Harris, right? Being a Howard alum herself, walking the same grounds that I walked, even though she walked it as an undergrad and I walked it as a graduate student, but being able to rise to be the first African American and Indian vice president and woman vice president of the United States, right? So Black girl magic is on display. It is the ability to see what we've always seen, but now the world gets a glimpse, just a glimpse, into the beauty of the diaspora and the Black experience. And I think that Black women deserve to be celebrated more than we have been. And I think about Stacey Abrams, right? And I think about Keisha Lance Bottoms. And I think about just, even most recently, Cicely Tyson, and 96 years of dynamicness.
Yes.
An icon. So that is Black girl magic. It is the personification of who we are and who we've always been. But now the world gets just a little bit of glimpse into our lives.
I can see the Black girl magic it's just coming out as you speak, and I'm loving it because I truly believe in the Black girl magic, and I'm a couple of decades older, but let me tell you, I felt I always had that Black girl magic, and I'm loving it more, seeing it every day, and it's exciting for our young people to see it. Because I remember when President Obama came into office, it was all about the young Black males can see themselves now as president. Yes. But this is really us as a people seeing ourselves move forward, especially with the Black Girl Magic. And in saying that, you know, psychologically, what we saw how all this wonderful stuff, and then we wake up January 6th and see what happened at the Capitol. How does that really affect us as a people? And how do we talk to our children about what that's doing? Because we have this wonderful magic, and all of a sudden this crushing, just unbelievable thing that happened. And we were all excited after the election. We were waiting for the inauguration, and then boom. So how do we, as a psychologist and, you know, in this field, how do we talk to our community, especially the Black community? Because there's a very big difference between Black Lives Matters and white terrorists. And that's been a question, because that psychologically does something to a person looking at those two movements.
Yeah.
And with all the wonderfulness about it, how do we talk to our community population?
You know, that is it's a lot to take in. I think even for me as a native Washingtonian, living in the district, in the heart of the district, growing up in the district, I remember how many times I visited the Capitol, and I know the process that you have to go through to get into the Capitol. So to see the insurrection take place on January 6th, I was in shock. I couldn't believe what I was watching, but I was taking it in and trying to see what the end result would be. I think a lot of the conversation that's come out post that experience is really the two treatments in America by two different citizens, because it's not as if we're talking about a citizen versus a non-citizen. You're talking about two groups of citizens, white and Black, who are different in terms of race, gender, etc., but really race, and the treatment that they get when they exercise their right to protest. So a lot of what we do when we exercise our rights to protest as Black people is there are mechanisms behind it. I have not yet seen what happened with the insurrection happen with a Black Lives Matter group or a Black group in general. There is, what is the best way to say it? There is a feeling of ownership that white people feel like they have in America, and have been told and have been encouraged that this is theirs. And that is not the same feeling that we have. I think one of the best quotes I heard is that as an American, you get life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And Black people are still at life. We're still in the beginning stages. And so to see in blatant view, and also the recap that happens, the two Americas, is a reminder that our experience is not the same. That if it was us even trying to walk up to the Capitol, it would be totally different. And I really appreciate President Biden speaking to that and saying, if this was a Black group or Black Lives Matter, the outcome would be totally different. And we know that. So I think that it does do something to the psyche of the Black person when they realize that other groups have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and we're just trying to be alive. And a lot of the context and communication is not, we want you to treat them like you treat us. It's rather, we want you to treat us like you treat them. We don't even want the outcome of death for them, but rather the equality of outcome for everyone. That everyone should be giving their due time and their due process in the court of law, and that everyone should have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So it really deeply saddened me. And even weeks later, they're still trying to find people and still trying to forego their or go through their process. But I think everyone is holding their breath to see what the outcome will be.
Can I jump in?
Well, yes. But before you jump in, I want to say I want to make sure a lot of them have been released on their own recognizance. So, and it's interesting, the young boy who shot the two Black Lives Matters, they now can't find him.
Yeah, he's on
so it's like
in Kenosha.
Yeah, Cal Rittenhouse.
Yes, he's now out. He was out on bail, and now they can't find him.
Or the insurrectionist that asked for specific food in the jail, or the other one that asked to be released so she can go to Mexico with her family.
She got permission.
Now, did they release her? I don't know if they released her. Did they release her?
To go on
oh my goodness.
So it's a vastly different experience.
That brings me to my question. Mm-hmm. Is it possible to reimagine, reinvent, and rebuild new systems of accountability tied to justice in America? And is politics the answer from a mental point of defense when it is forever out of reach? Want me to repeat it?
Yes, please.
Okay. We're talking about the insurrection and everything in terms of justice. So is it possible to reimagine, reinvent, and rebuild new systems of accountability tied to justice in America? And is politics the answer from a mental point of defense when it seems to be forever out of reach, us receiving justice?
It is possible to rebuild and reimagine a new America. But I think in order for one to do so, you have to get to the root of the issue. We can no longer have dialogue and discourse and say, this is not America, this is not who we are, because it is. This may not be America for this group, but this is all that we've known for Black people. And so in order to be able to have discourse, in order to be able to move forward, you have to come from a place of honesty. We have to take a mirror to America and allow ourselves to see both the good, but also the very evil and negative parts of it. There is no way to move forward if you do not acknowledge. And I think that's even a conversation that people have all the time around reparations, right? You first have to acknowledge that these things occurred. You have to acknowledge that people were stolen, that people were sold, that they were raped, that they were killed. All of those things have to be acknowledged by name. You have to bring it to light. And then once you're able to do that, then you can have more discourse around how do we go from there to here? But if you keep with the narrative of this is not us, this is not who we are, we're better than this, knowing that there is a group of people that have experienced something different, then we're not being honest. So the first thing we have to do is be honest. And then when we're honest, honesty requires you to take a look in the mirror. Like Michael Jackson said, I'm looking at the man in the mirror, right? Take a look in the mirror and do my own, being able to take in my own image and what that looks like. And then from there, we can start doing the work. And the work requires all people. Often there is this need for Black people to lead a lot of these revolutions. No, we need all people of all color, of all descents, of all languages, of all experiences, because that's that's the back America was built on. Black and brown people. So we need them at the table, but we also need our white counterparts. Correct. To not just say, I'm not racist, but be anti-racist and be anti-racism. So it can happen, but it's going to require work. The question is, are we willing to do the work? And as of now, my answer is no, or we're not ready.
We are not ready, or America's not ready.
We as America.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we as America is not ready. But we're going to take a real quick commercial break. And then when we come back, we're going to be talking about COVID and mental health and looking at how the COVID has really impacted our health. And then hopefully get to how can we identify it and move forward and help our Black population here across the country in the United States and worldwide with what we're seeing right now. So right after this commercial break, we'll be back to talk about COVID.
Do you want to promote your business? Do you want to talk about your nonprofit organization? Do you want to talk about your culture? Introducing the online web TV, Afric Today. Fogham. You can watch us live at the same time on 4 platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and using the Afric Today app. Download our app today for Android or Apple. Promote your business today. For more information, go to www.africtoday.com. Afric Today, the best of digital TV.
Welcome back. And now we're going to dive right into COVID and how this COVID-19 and the social isolation, all this wonderful things that we're living through right now, how that is affecting our communities, and especially how it is impacting the Black communities and at the degree that it's affecting our communities. Could you talk a little bit about that? And we've seen so much happen, suicides increase. Tell us a little bit about what's going on with mental health and COVID-19 in this whole pandemic.
So let me first, I think it's important to frame it. So when we think about COVID-19 in the Black community, I think it's important for us to note how we're viewing it.
Yes.
So the Black community, or African Americans, make up 13% of the US population. So we make up 13% of the US population, but 36% of deaths due to COVID. And there are many reasons why ethnic minorities, but particularly Black people and Black and brown people, are being impacted by COVID-19 and dying at a higher rate. Living conditions is one. Minorities or ethnic minorities tend to live in densely populated areas due to institutional racism in the form of residential housing segregation. The homes that they live in may be further away from medical facilities and stores. They may live in multi-generational homes. So if someone has COVID, that it's easier to pass on because they live in multi-generational homes. And then there are other risks, including overrepresentation in jails, prison, and detention centers, which have specific risks due to congregated living, shared food service, et cetera, work circumstances. If we're thinking about essential, and what that whole term of essential came up in the beginning of the pandemic, you're thinking about ethnic minorities, right? Because they work in sanitation industries, they work as cashiers, they work as caregivers, they work as farm workers, public transportation employees. And so these individuals may not have all the access because, one, they're essential, they're critical workers, and then they may not have the ability to take paid leave, which forces them to work even when they may be sick. And then last but not least, underlying health conditions and lower access to care. So they may not have health insurance, they have serious underlying medical conditions like high blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease, and to note that these things are also due to stigma and systematic inequalities. So when we're thinking about COVID-19 in the Black community, we have to first acknowledge that there are a lot of things that preclude us from getting the help that we need, that deal with institutional racism or racism due to housing inequalities, et cetera, which makes us further at risk. And then now you're talking about multi-generational homes. And, now I'm an essential worker. I come home with COVID, but my grandmother lives with me. My mother lives with me. My sisters live with me. Now I have to isolate, but where do I go? I don't have the money to get hotels and things like that. And so it's now passed on, or I may be asymptomatic and not know. And I pass it on, and then the outcome comes from it. So it's a lot of layering, but it goes back to access and racism. Really does impact Black mental health and COVID. So when we're thinking about Black mental health as it relates to COVID, there's so many things that are now coming out. People are thinking about or talking about having anxiety. We're talking about isolation for people who live at home by themselves. That's really impacting people. Thinking about mothers or families where they're still having to work as full-time employees. Now schools are closed, so they're also caretakers. They're also homeschooling their kids. And so now they've become school teachers, and that's not a role that they've ever played before. There might be caretakers in the home, people responsible for other people. So the load has increased, and the support and the help has decreased due to not being able to go out, due to maybe people's comfortability, due to lack of access, and then of course due to the stigma of mental health that still, is in many communities.
Now, how can we identify? Well, first I want you to touch on suicide now, that because Taraji Henderson came out and talked about, she had these, suicide ideology, and one, really thought about it. So what are we seeing around our young people and our individuals in general committing suicide? And what are some of the signs that we as individuals in the community or family members can identify? Because we don't talk about it. So what are some of the signs we need to look for?
So when you're thinking about signs of suicide, or things that put an individual at risk for suicide, you have to think about a family history of suicide. Are there people in that individual's family who have committed suicide in the past? Do they have exposure to suicide? Is it something that they have experience with? We have to also think about substance use. So drugs and alcohol can impact an individual's mental health, and that can worsen their suicidal thoughts. I remember the first week watching CNN, the first week of the pandemic, and it said that alcohol sales had increased up to 400%. And that was the first week.
Oh, yes.
So we can only imagine now, almost 11 months in a pandemic, 11 months, what that looks like as people try to cope and go to what they know is a comfort for them, which we view as maladaptive coping, right? Because you drink or you smoke, it doesn't take the problem away, it just numbs it for the period. So another risk of suicide is substance use. Intoxication is another piece. They've noted, research has shown that 1 in 3 people that have committed suicide were under the influence of some type of substance or alcohol at the time of death. Access to firearms is another risk of suicide. Do they have these things in their home? Are these things available to them? Serious or chronic mental illness, if they've already had a pre-existing diagnosis that has made them more susceptible to suicidal thoughts or suicide completion, is another risk of suicide. A history of trauma or abuse. Research has also shown can increase the risk of suicide. Prolonged stress, which we know that this pandemic has been extremely stressful, can also increase the risk of suicide. And then gender. Although more women than men attempt suicide, men are nearly 4 times more likely to die by suicide or complete suicide. So these are some of the risks for suicide, for completing suicide or going through or experiencing suicide in one's family. It's important to know, because I know you brought up Taraji P. Henderson, that she speaks, and just to give it a little bit of context, she speaks about having suicidal thoughts in the pandemic. And that is not, I don't want to use the word normal, but when someone is experiencing loneliness or isolation or depression or anxiety, they may have thoughts of wanting to end their life. They may have thoughts of wanting to exit life, or they may feel like people would be better off if they were gone, or they may just have a lot of different thoughts of what would life be like if I wasn't here. But that suicidal thoughts don't always necessarily lead to suicide completion, right? And so if you're able to get assistance and get help and have protective factors, as she was during that time, we're able, you don't have to go to the opposite end. So you can have these thoughts of, no one loves me, no one cares about me, people even care if I'm still here, and get the help that you need and be able to be on a better side.
Now, what are some of the signs that we can kind of try to identify? And one other thing I want to mention, that you how the alcohol sales went up. Remember, the gun sales went up too. So the gun sales, because you can't even find a gun now. You have to wait months before, as they can't make them fast enough anymore. So gun sales and the alcohol use went up, which was very interesting during this period, and they're still going up. So what are some of the signs as a family member? What can we look for depression? What are some of these signs and symptoms that we need to look for in our families during this period?
I think it's important to just pay attention to the individual, especially if you are a parent or in a parental role or a family role. You may know their behavior. You may know how it is that they act. You know how it is, or how they display anger, or how they display frustration, anxiety, sadness. And so really just looking out and just being mindful of what's happening. If you notice a huge change in behavior, if you notice that they used to go out, and I know that's hard in the pandemic, or used to hang out with people, but now they are becoming more isolated. They don't want to spend time around family. They don't want to be engaged in different things that they may be interested in, because there's a lot of people that are still keeping up interest even during the pandemic. So if that's bike riding or exercising or going to the gym, there are other ways that they can still keep engaged. And if you notice a decline in that, that may be something. In some cases, people may start to give things away. So give things away that they really cherish to other people. That may be also another sign that they are potentially contemplating suicide. Changes in the way in which they talk and interact with people. If they if you're used to them talking and engaging with you in a certain way, and they're not doing that, that's also another sign. So I think really one of the things that is really important is really just paying attention, because oftentimes people will speak to potentially what's happening to them, whether it's verbally or through their actions. So really just being intentional and being present is going to be one of the biggest things.
Now, for someone who is having some mental health issues right now, how can they get assistance, especially during COVID and there's no physical appointments? How can we get people to get some assistance?
So I think one of the opportunities that COVID presented, especially for the mental health community, is the transition to telemental health. Prior to that, there's been a lot of discourse about can therapy be effective virtually? And so we're now seeing almost 11 months in that it can be. And so I think the first thing to do, if you notice that you're having some mental health challenges and you're in need of support, is to reach out, is to connect with services. There are many websites that you can find a clinician, even a clinician of color, to be able to see and connect with. So one of them is Psychology Today. You can literally Google Psychology Today and you're able to look it up. Another one is Therapy for Black Girls, Therapy for Black Men. So there are a lot of different links that are available for people to access services. So although the appointments are not in person, and if you think about it, a lot of your medical appointments are not in person, right? And so It's just a different way of being able to be treated. So it doesn't mean bad as much as it means just different. And so being able to have that connectivity, even though it's through a screen, is extremely helpful. So I would say connect with services. Also, there are little things too that you can do. It's going to be really important that you get up and start your day. Do your hygiene things in the morning. So sometimes people are doing work all day and they never get a chance to take a bath or just do other hygiene things because they roll over and go straight to work. So taking a bath, resetting. You could try exercising, changing your diet is going to be also important. Reconnecting with your higher power, whether that's religiosity or spirituality, mindfulness, exercising, connecting one to another is also going to be really important. So those things also help to boost your mental health, is really just engagement. But when you find that you really need to talk to someone and you really need support, we want you to reach out for support because support is available to you.
This is the 10
Now, can you name
warning.
those sites again?
Yes.
I want you to name those sites again, and if we can kind of get them up on the screen, if we can get those sites up on the screen.
So one is Psychology Today.
Psychology Today. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Therapy for Black Girls. Therapy for Black Men. You can also Google the American Psychological Association, which is the governing body for most people who are psychologists. And you're able to look up clinicians through that route also. And then you can go through your employee assistance program, your EAP. If you have job employment and you have medical and dental, most times you have mental health also, and it's just a copay just like your other appointments. So you can go through your employee assistance program to get your mental health connection to whatever your mental health insurance is. And or you can go to a lot of these sites and just put in what your insurance is, if it's Cigna, if it's Blue Cross Blue Shield, if it's United, or if it's something else, and then you'll be able to see the clinicians that are available to you.
Now, a question on that also, because I want to talk about access and financial. As we know, a lot of our individuals are those frontline workers, and they don't have that. They're, underinsured or no insurance, and then they can't afford to pay services. And so how can we work with that population? Because that's a population that is really at risk and at need right now. And so are there free services anywhere?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, are there free services? Are there any free services that you can recommend?
I don't have any on the top of my hand, but I know that a lot of different clinicians potentially offer sliding scale. So what that means is that they will tell you what their fee is. Mm-hmm. But if the person is not able to afford it due to financial reasons, et cetera, they will let you know what their sliding fee is based on that. There are also some clinicians that work pro bono, and you can look that up. I know that you talked a little bit about Taraji P. Henson, which is a HU alum. And I want to say that her foundation created an opportunity to get access to free mental health services. I want to confirm that.
Well,
I want to.
Well, I know she has a show getting ready to come up, which I'm really excited about, and I hope people can look it up. It's going to be on Facebook, where she actually has a show just talking about mental health in the Black community. So there'll be other Black women and actresses and people who you might recognize and know who are coming to the table and just talking about some of the mental health issues as it involves people of color and Black folks in general. So I'm really excited about that. And I believe her services they do have free services, you suggested, so I tell people out there, please make sure if you know anyone who is in need of services, mental health services, they can't afford it, please look up Taraji B. Henson's foundation. She is going to be having a show coming out on Facebook where you can follow, but they will help support individuals who need financial support to see a clinician, because this is an area. Mm-hmm.
The name of the foundation is the Boris Lawrence Henson Foundation. And they did launch a campaign in April to provide free therapeutic services to African Americans. And of course, we know Taraji is a HU alum. right? So Howard is still doing some really big
Hey,
things.
you.
You know, and so definitely also people can also look up free services in their city. So I don't know, I know this conversation goes worldwide, so but if you're in the District of
Yes.
Columbia, definitely look up free therapeutic services in the district, and it should give you links to different people that you can connect with.
5-minute warning.
And oh, thank you. And one other resource I give it up to people out there. Our Department of Health, also the Minority Department of Health, and you can look them in your cities and your areas. They also have support and resources. And there's a lot of ways that we can, as individuals, get the support, even if we don't have the financial means for it.
Yes.
So please do not let your financial situation impede you from getting the needed services you need, especially as it relates to health. Mental health issues are occurring in our communities right now, and it's impacting us at a greater rate than other folks. And so you got to really focus on it, get the help, because I want all our young brothers and sisters to stay safe and healthy, because I've seen an increase in suicide and with individuals who we never thought it would happen. And the social isolation is really impacting adults.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and these young people, I have some young ones, and they keep going out. And so I keep telling you, please just stay home. But a lot of young people are still, they're like, let me get this vaccine and get out there. And they don't realize that just getting that vaccine does not allow them to wreak havoc. You still have to do all the precautions. Go ahead.
Yes. No, I agree. All the precautions, the washing the hands, the 12 feet. I think the CDC is now regulating 2 masks, or saying 2 masks is beneficial. So I know that it's going to be harder to breathe with the 2 masks. I think we just have to really be cognizant of the fact, like we said earlier, that African Americans make up 13% of the population, but 36% due to COVID. And so when we're looking at the numbers, even I looked at the numbers today, you're talking about 455,000 plus people that have died in the span of 11 months. You're talking about almost 50,000 cases a month. That's a lot of people. And so this is a real pandemic. And I know that it's hard to be in the house. I know that it's hard to be behind closed doors and not visiting with family and having to be isolated. We even changed our languaging around that. So we don't want you to, we want you to distance, but the terminology is social distance. We want you to distance, but still remain social. So that means connecting with people on virtually, calling people on the phone, maybe meeting in an open space where you can be 12 feet or plus apart and being able to engage one to another. There's a lot of social distancing sports like golf and things like that can still give you a lot of leeway without being connected. So find ways to stay connected, because we don't want you to be isolated, but it's important that we lower the spread by following the guidelines that are presented to us. And I think it's really important, Dr. Yeboah. One of my favorite quotes is by Andre Lord, because I think when we're talking about mental health, we have to talk about self-care. And he says, self-care is an act of resistance. Caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation. And that is an act of political warfare. So really just being mindful that sometimes we view caring for ourselves as a luxury, and it's not. Right? I always say you can't pour from an empty cup, right? So it's not a luxury to take care for yourself. It is essential. You need to replenish yourself. You need to take care of yourself. It is important. Yes, ma'am.
I have a comment that I'd like you to respond to.
Okay.
We got 1 minute, so we're really out of time. But it says, here's the statement. By watching our grandmothers and mothers, we learn to just keep on keeping on, despite the toll on one's physical and mental well-being. So how does that stand with what you were saying in terms of Black women?
Yes, I think Black women, we stand on the shoulders of many that have come before us and have paved ways that we can only imagine. So our walk will never be their walk. Our walk will always be different because we were born in a different time. So while we take on their strength, we also add in the importance of taking care of oneself. Right? Because they didn't have that opportunity. they kept going and they kept pushing. And to be honest with you, sometimes it was to their detriment. And so we keep their strength. We keep pushing, we keep going forward, but we take care of ourselves in the midst of, because we realize that, we have to care for ourselves. This is no longer an indulgent thing, or, taking care of myself is something I can do 60 years from now. No, it is today. Because this pandemic is impacting us mentally, physically, and for a lot of people also financially. But that mental wellness is important. So we cannot just keep shouldering the burden and keep moving and keep moving. We have to take the time to stop, take off the bags, and take care of ourselves.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Oh, Dr. Fluid, thank you so much for your time today. I hope our audience has been edified a lot more, and really think about those resources. And it's okay if you need to see a therapist for any point in time, for any reason. And now we need it more than ever. We're being impacted with the social distancing, we're impacted with COVID. Things are happening in our communities that we have no control of. And when we feel out of control, a lot of other mental health issues surface. So please, I urge my audience today, first of all, I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank Dr. Fluid, but I really want to make sure that you get out, make sure she gave some tips, start doing self-love, all the wonderful stuff, but really make sure if you need the help, get the help, and do not let finances be your deciding factor, because we want to be healthier on the other side of this pandemic. Yes. So once again, I want to thank my guest, Dr. Fluid. I want to thank my co-host for being here today. Right. And I also want to thank Afric Today for this opportunity to bring an hour to you every Friday of different information that hopefully will move us further as a nation. Thank you again. And thank you, Afric Today.
Thank you, Afric Today. Thank you, Dr. Yvonne.